I think people intuitively know when that little voice is telling them they're overburdened, overwhelmed, or over anything really, but they just aren't listening. Because for some reason, culturally, I think we have become closed off to that inner voice of knowing and listening.
Hi there, welcome to Sunny with a Chance of Chaos. I'm Lindsay, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and get ready for a little bit of chaos and a whole lot of sunshine. Hey there, welcome back to Sunny with a Chance of Chaos. I can't tell you how excited I am. I'm sitting here beside this beautiful human named Talea. She is not only a good friend of mine, she is also a trained yoga instructor. She is a cancer survivor, and she happens to be a bit of an expert on today's topic, which is toxic resilience. I'm so honored to have you here today, Talea.
Hey, Linz. Very happy to be here.
I'm excited that you're excited. Are you nervous?
I'm very nervous.
Are you?
Yeah, I'll loosen up. But...
Fair. Okay. So one night a couple years ago, we were in your kitchen, and I don't even remember what we were talking about, but you used the term toxic resilience in a sentence, and my ears totally perked up because I was like scoping for podcast content, you know. After all the work I had done with toxic positivity, I was super attuned to the word toxic. So I asked you about it, and after you explained it and your experience with it directly, I knew I wanted to talk about it on the podcast. So I know the concept of toxic positivity from season 1 resonated with so many listeners, and I'm curious to see if this one will too.
Yeah, it's crazy to think of all the things that we just do and say in our day-to-day lives without even giving it a second thought, and how toxic those things can be without us even knowing or realizing.
Yeah.
I think often our intentions are so good and we think we are doing the right thing. But I think toxic resilience is one way that we actually do this in today's society.
So explain to us what toxic resilience means to you. Like, what is this?
Okay. So my understanding of it just tolerating situations and conditions that really should not be endured. So when things get hard, we often hear people say, you got this.
You got this.
Yeah. Toxic resilience is, I think, a close cousin to toxic positivity.
Okay.
I feel like what spawns most of the concepts is rooted in a similar idea of trying to foster strength or inspire courage and shift a mindset. And while well-intentioned, I think it can be damaging because, like toxic positivity, it creates a situation where people feel potentially unheard or invalidated. What if they don't want to show up and fight and be brave, even for a day or two?
Right.
So now what? So it inherently means they're failing when they are facing something difficult. So it just seems unfair to me. So many people that I know are, completely overwhelmed with life. The problem is, I think people intuitively know when that little voice is telling them they're overburdened, overwhelmed, or over anything really, but they just aren't listening. Because for some reason, culturally, I think we have become closed off to that inner voice of knowing and listening to the voice when it says, this is bad for me. This doesn't feel quite right. Yeah. It seems to me that, most people continue to operate in this state of overwhelm while only a few work to kind of reconnect with that inner voice. That's so scary.
That's crazy that we just exist like this, right? And we don't stop and listen.
Yeah, for sure. Not too long ago, I started seeing a therapist, and she helped me to articulate that actually the workforce, even self-help and wellness culture to an extent, really benefit from us embracing this mentality that if we just breathe or move our bodies or stretch or meditate, get a massage, that it will fix us, that we are the issue. Right. And that making some adjustments will make us more capable to take it all or take more on. Wait, what?
Wait, pardon? I'm sorry, pardon?
So, maybe we aren't the problem at all. Maybe life is just too much and we're just trying to take it all on with no permission to take a break. And I think over the short term, this must push on mentality can result in tiredness, irritability, being frustrated, reduced coping, sleeplessness, tension, headaches, long list.
Yeah, sleepless nights for sure.
But longer term, I think it can look like burnout, depression, or disengagement in life, just long-term overwhelm, much larger issues.
Big stuff, yeah.
I think we've in some ways been manipulated to believe that we must take it all on, or else we're a failure. We get a badge of honor for taking it all on, even though we intuitively know it's too much. So we take it all on, but at what cost? And it's a complicated remedy, though, because the structure of, I think, our North American lives, work, kid, activities.
Yeah, it piles on.
Yeah, all the responsibilities are pretty inflexible and somewhat solitary.
Right.
So on top of all that, God forbid you have any issues or external stress or worries. So we have to toughen up, put on a brave face, be positive and inspiring. And that right there is the toxic resiliency I'm concerned about.
Yeah, at the core, that's it.
Absolutely. So instead of stopping and putting something down, we're told to soldier on and do it, and possibly while smiling.
Probably also while smiling and maybe juggling at the same time. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I actually found it interesting this week. I kind of noticed something that happened within my own family, and just getting ready for doing the podcast with you, it had been on my mind. So I have a daughter who's almost 17. She's, very dedicated student, wants high marks, has aspirations down the road of med school and things that really she has kind of heaped on herself. She is. But she puts a lot of pressure on herself. And we always try to kind of give her the out. There's more than one path and all these sorts of things. But she's also, started to play on her school soccer team. And, so just like full schedule, right? Like academically and all the things, a job on the weekend. And she was getting sick. So she's got all these commitments this week. She's sick and tired, and trying to give her the out. Maybe you shouldn't be going to that game today, or whatever it is. Like, these things really are optional. No, Mom, I'm gonna power through.
She literally said those words?
Yep. Oh. And I immediately thought of this, and I thought, there it is right there.
It's
why?
Right there.
Why? Yeah. What's on the line for you? Why do you have to power through? And why don't you listen to your body? It's sick. It's tired. And nope, I've got to power through.
What a beautiful opportunity for you to model for her, hey, guess what? It's okay to say, actually, I need a break.
Yeah, I tried to do that. She didn't listen.
It's because she's almost 17. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is blowing my mind. All of this, this concept is blowing my mind. Your awareness of it and your insights into it are absolutely blowing my mind. So let's go back for a second. So the toxic part of toxic resiliency, in my understanding, can be when the call to resiliency is being put upon us, not necessarily by choice, by someone else or an external body or organization or mentality or philosophy. So it's causing stress and anxiety, and we're being told to chin up, you got this, and other like empty, maladaptive and unhelpful terms in situations where we should not be asked to be perpetually hopeful or to persevere. I read something actually on Instagram the other day that said there is no reason why any of us should have to, quote unquote, thrive in a fast-paced environment or work well under pressure, which kind of give the impression that these are badges of honor, something you should put on your resume.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And most of our daily work, if we really think about it, T, is not an emergency.
No.
Most of what we do is not an emergency. And in our culture, we love to subscribe to a sense of fake urgency. So how do you think that this mentality in the Western world plays a role in toxic resilience?
I think just thinking, you hear people say, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I don't know how I'll get through it all, and the toxic response to something like that would maybe be something like, oh, you've totally got this. You'll be fine. All good. You're going to kill it. You're a badass. You just have to power through. Power through. you can sleep when you're dead.
Yeah.
But what if when we were talking to a friend about this wild overburdened week, that they responded with something like, wow, that sounds like you've got too much on your plate. You know, is there anything you can let go of or put down? And this response gives permission to acknowledge it's just too much.
It's just too much.
Yeah. You know, a response of like, how can I help? What do you need?
Yeah.
Less toxic, in my opinion, than, you know, power through.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it shows up, you know, day-to-day lives, but also when we're going through periods of grief.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, if folks in our lives are experiencing a loss or a partner, a family member, a pet, I think unwittingly we can sometimes encourage them to move on quicker than they're ready to. You know, often place arbitrary timelines on the grief process, even though we know that everyone's experience of grief and the timeline for processing that grief, you know, varies greatly. We often say things like, it's time to get back out there for someone who's going through a breakup, or we stop checking in as frequently on the person who's lost someone. And just believe that they should maybe have moved on after a certain number of weeks. Yeah. So just kind of this unspoken societal expiration date, after which it's time to buck up and move on.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I remember actually a couple of years ago, a friend of mine, Kay, she was in a really intense relationship. It was super meaningful to her. They were only together for about 6 months, but she was heartbroken when it didn't work out. And I remember her sitting on the porch saying, I should just be over it. I should have moved on by now. And our other friend saying, actually, you're going to move on when you're ready to move on. It doesn't matter how long you were together. You're allowed to be sad for as long as it takes. Kay was subscribing to this societal view that she should just get over it and move on and jump back online on the dating apps and stuff. But her connection with this person was different. It was deeper, and she needed more time. And in that conversation on the porch, our friend gave her that space and that permission to take as much time as she needed. And it was so beautiful. It was a perfect example for me of how to counteract toxic resiliency.
Yeah. And again, like, it's that listening to that little voice. What do you need?
What do you need?
Yeah.
There's no rules.
No,
right.
Not at all. You know, like a grief, whatever it is, an appropriate response to someone's grief would be more like, it's okay to be sad. This is going to take time. It's okay to be tender with yourself. You know, grief
I like that.
Doesn't happen on a schedule or a timeline, and everyone's path or timeline will be different. There's no prize for moving through it the fastest or crying the least amount of tears. And for some reason it's rewarded, I think, and admired or revered to show up and just be tough and power through.
Another place I see this is when people are working through illness, like serious illness, and this, you have your own experience with this. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yep, for sure. So at the very end of 2019, I received a diagnosis of having breast cancer. And so as I was going through, you know, surgery and then treatment and kind of all my appointments, very busy with that in 2020 during COVID. That was fun.
I'm sorry. There was also maybe a small problem of a pandemic happening at the same time. No big deal. Yeah. Power through,
right? Power through that cancer, girl. But I remember being with one of my doctors, and I was not feeling particularly strong. But that very much is kind of part of the how to kind of approach cancer, and seems to be kind of somewhat of the unspoken way. So it's like approaching a cancer diagnosis like it's a battle, you know, taking on this warrior mentality. And like, don't get me wrong, I see value in having some of that mindset when you're facing something scary. You want to tap into courage, of course. And also, you know, it's a place to meet our own bodies where they're at with loving care and kindness, rather than going through battle with our own body. So it was my doctor that introduced me to the concept of toxic resilience. When I admitted I wasn't feeling so strong, she articulated that it is in fact a thing that's kind of out there. And she actually was really opposed to that particular mindset when trying to kind of face your cancer journey.
So validating.
It was super validating. Yeah, I feel scared, and I want to be able to admit that.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. And like the concept, this is the body that's carried us through our whole lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
we need to love it when it's sick, not go to war.
Right.
You know,
right.
in my opinion, again, everyone's got a different way to approach it, but that really did not resonate for me.
Okay. So some people would say that the cancer is the thing you're battling, not your own body, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So like, I think what I've kind of come to look at it as, so you're diagnosed with cancer, that's going on. It's like screaming at a crying infant or getting into a power struggle with an obstinate toddler, which, by the way, nobody wins.
Oh, P.S. Don't ever do that. Yeah.
You know, when they're really fussy, what they need is kindness and softness, tenderness to work through whatever hard thing is that they're experiencing. You know, we don't teach them to power through.
Buck up.
You know, why can't we love our bodies when they are going through something hard? You know, use all the tools, the courage, the ferocity, determination, but balanced with compassion and loving kindness on the days when you just don't have as much fight in you.
Right. And giving yourself permission to just like take a soft day.
Yeah. You know, and toxic resilience doesn't really leave any room or permission for you to admit it on the days when you don't feel so strong. And when you don't feel strong, you feel shame about it. That you're not living up to this arbitrary societal standard of how we should be working through this illness or this grief or this loss, whatever.
So that conversation with your doctor would have offered you an opportunity to let go of the shame of feeling not so strong on that day you were in the office with her.
Yeah.
I love that.
And she helped me understand like what was happening.
Okay. That's so cool.
You know, I like one of the things that I've noticed is I've seen shirts and different things related to breast cancer, and it says stuff like, my boobs tried to kill me. As soon as I saw those shirts, I'm like, it just really struck a chord with me, like in a bad way. I don't like it. Like I don't like joking that your body's working in opposition to you. You know, you are your body. We're more than just our body, but you are your body. Your body is you. So I never felt like my breasts were trying to kill me. You know, cancer appearing in my body was just something that happened. My body wasn't declaring war. My body needed help. You know, and like, don't get me wrong, there's room for levity, and you have to, you know, be able to try and use some of that for your coping, but to me, not to the point of flippancy.
Okay. So humor has its place, but not to the point where we sort of disregard the seriousness of the situation. Yeah. Okay.
And I just felt at times like I didn't always need a cheerleader. Sometimes I just wanted like a friend, you know? And I think it's just someone where you knew you could admit, this is hard for me, because one of the things that I can say is that many people, if they saw that I was smiling and seemed to be really kind of handling my diagnosis well, you know, then they tell you they think you're brave. So then how do you let someone down who thinks you're brave? And when really inside you're like, I'm afraid I might die from this, you know? So yeah, it requires vulnerability and the ability to be vulnerable without feeling judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember reading, actually, this is a Glennon Doyle thing. Courage is two things. Courage is being scared and doing it anyway, or being scared and saying, actually, I can't today. There's two ways to be brave. Yeah. And so some days you were probably like, yeah, I'm brave, I'm going to do this. And then other days you're probably like, you know what, I'm brave today, I can't.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, she's genius. So this is actually, it's interesting, this concept of like courage and bravery, because when I was pregnant with my second child, I wanted an unmedicated birth for lots of reasons, and I did end up having one, and I'm so happy that I did. Let me preface with that. However, during my pregnancy, I was dead set and determined to have an unmedicated birth come hell or high water. And I remember talking to a colleague who is also a father of 3 about it in the staff room at school one day. And he looked at me and he said, but what if things go wrong? Or what if you change your mind? And what if you ask for the epidural or the drugs or whatever? And I was insistent. Nope. That wasn't happening.
You had a vision.
I had a vision. I had a plan. And then he said, I admire the courage and determination. And you have to remember you don't get any hero pay. And that was a helpful conversation because it gave me some insight into how to have compassion and care and meet myself with that loving kindness you were talking about during a hard time, rather than always with like gritted teeth and blind determination. Sometimes we can just be soft with ourselves.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so much pressure, right? Like
we do put a lot of pressure on
another
ourselves.
Little kind of quiet badge that you get
Absolutely.
if you do it one way versus another.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I had my first birth with an epidural, my second birth without. It, there's zero judgment either way. I just think we have to meet ourselves where we're at in those moments, right? Yeah. I think there's lots and lots of reasons why people subscribe to toxic resiliency. There's the problem of vulnerability. It's a huge problem. There's the problem of asking for help. There's the stigma of taking a break or being soft. There's the stigma of mental health. So I know you have a lot of experience with your yoga practice and things like that. I'm curious about your understanding of some of the reasons why we continue to push people to push through or power through.
Mm-hmm. I think, trying to kind of have some understanding for why people might show up for you in that way, that like kind of appears to be like toxic resilience or promoting toxic resilience. I think that people do it, to themselves and others to mitigate their own discomfort. People don't like to see people suffer or see them uncomfortable or maybe just don't even have emotional space or bandwidth to hold someone else's pain.
Right.
So what could feel like a great option is just for someone to push the other person through their own pain so they don't have to, feel or carry or hold that pain themselves. And part of why we suffer as humans is our tendency to want to push away or resist things that don't feel good, the painful feelings. Not that I'm Buddhist, but again, in yoga, like lots of the things that I kind of, read or follow, certainly Buddhist thinking is different. The practice within Buddhist thinking more like, hello, discomfort. Hello, pain.
Hello there.
Hello, fear, sadness. I know you have a message for me. I see you. I hear you. I love you. I'll take care of you. And I think that Eastern teaching or Eastern thinking can teach us that suffering comes when we can't accept something the way it is. Western thinking is we must battle, overcome, persevere, defeat the enemy of sadness,
defeat the enemy,
grief, cancer. And I think that's where we step into toxic resiliency.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I have to admit, there's a fine line for me because I know for a fact that old saying of whether or not you think you can or you can't, you're right. I believe that to be true.
Yeah.
So sometimes believing you got this means you're already halfway there to achieving whatever it is that you were going for. However,
I think it is. I think it's relevant, and particularly for, maybe mildly, moderately challenging situations that come up, we're able to take them on with a little push, some positive self-talk, a pep talk from a friend. But I don't know that it necessarily applies to the really big stuff.
To the big stuff.
And not all the time.
Right. Okay. So the smaller sort of like, get up at 5:30 and do your workout. Like that requires a little bit of like, I think I can do this.
Yeah, we have to have that discipline.
Right. Okay. So there's a difference then between discipline and toxic resiliency. There's a difference between those concepts and the way that we approach it with regard to the little things versus the big things like illness and grief.
Yeah. And it's like, I think pushing ourselves into a situation to help motivate ourselves through something.
Yeah.
But not keeping ourselves in a situation that's so stressful or so challenging that we're sacrificing our own well-being or health.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so what do we do about it? How do we stop doing this? Tell us, oh wise one.
Oh, well,
how do we stop doing this?
I don't know that I'm the wise one, but I think just in what I've learned, very grateful for different things that I've learned. So I'm always worried about mispronouncing his name, but Thich Nhat Hanh, so very well known and beloved Buddhist monk who passed recently, but has left many teachings with us. I think there's lots of messaging that he shared that I've learned that's helped me to kind of recognize.
Awesome.
And so that I think is key, to recognize, be conscious of what's happening, and notice and tune in when our response or someone else's goes from being helpful into that category of toxic resilience.
Okay. Thanks so much for being here. It's
exciting.
Gosh,
thank you so much. I'm not nervous anymore.
Hooray.
Yeah.
That's because that's at the end. Babe.
Right. That's key.
Okay, so welcome to the Stacks. We do this every week. So Talea, what do you got?
So one of the things that I've really enjoyed, and again, teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh. So there's a number of different books. One of the ones that I would think of, Happiness, is a good one, but there's lots of stuff out there that's been published by him. Also lots of things on YouTube. So recorded Dharma talks. And so Plum Village is a YouTube channel where there's lots of those Dharma talks from Thich Nhat Hanh.
Nice.
And lots of good nuggets to take away.
I love
on self-compassion. I think that all ties in nicely.
Oh, great. Okay, I'll have to check it out. So Happiness by Thich Nhat Hanh, Dharma talks on YouTube, and Plum Village on YouTube. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, our gratitude moment, obviously, should be very apparent by now. I'm extremely grateful for Talea being in my little home recording office space. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you agreed to do this. I'm so glad that we have been able to meet each other in hard conversation over the years. And when things like this come up, we don't just talk about them and let them slide. We do a little bit of a deeper dive, and you are one of those friends for me.
Oh,
and
same
I'm
here.
Super grateful for that.
I'm so grateful. Gratitude is going right back at you. Thank you for even being interested in what I have to say.
Always.
And this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Great. And to all of our listeners, always, always so grateful to have you here. Have a great week. Don't forget to turn your face towards the sun. See you next time. Bye.